And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. So, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. Anyone here for the first time? Those who are here for the first time, anyone want to share why?
Just heard descriptions of someone who came here routinely. That sounded interesting.
What'd they say?
It was a good way to clear their head and calm down, basically against anxiety.
So you mean you need to clear your head and calm down sometimes?
I think everyone does.
I know everyone does. I was talking about you, though.
Sure.
Yes. Anyone else in here need to clear their head and calm down sometimes? Look around. There's every hand in the room. They're already aware of it. You're brand new. So, yes, thanks for being here. What else is here for the first time wants to share?
Oh, I know him, and I feel the same way because I know him. So.
Does he cause you needing to calm down? And clear your head?
Yeah.
It's funny you came with a friend but sat apart. Not going to get into that right now. Nice. Anyone else want to follow that? Here for the first time, want to share why? Yes, in the back. Wow.
I told you, Jeff, I read your story in the Southwest magazine more than a year ago, and I've been wanting to come down here and check out the facility and what wonderful things you're doing, and also to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. What'd you learn from the story? Wait. Don't answer that. What's your boy's name?
Dean.
Dean. What did your dad tell you about the story?
You sort of bullied children when you were younger, but you went through a life-changing experience when you were older, and now you dedicate your life to helping others.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to hear from a 13-year-old. You know? Yeah, and I'm glad you said that I bullied children when I was younger. Otherwise, it would have sounded really tough. So I was letting you finish, but I was hoping you threw that in there. So thank you, Dean. Yeah, that's true. All of that. I used to be a really mean person. A lot of you know that by now, especially if you've been around me. Some of you might think I'm still mean, but that's just because I'm trying to run a temple here. But yeah, it was an article in Southwest magazine titled "The Bully and the Buddhist," and 2 Novembers ago, one of my dear friends who I grew up with, Eric Stoyer, wrote the story, and we started meeting. He'd heard what I was doing. It all started at the reunion. I won't tell the whole story now, but heard what I was doing, and he was really kind of shocked, how I went from the mean bully to, whatever I am now. And so we met a handful of times here, and then he said he wanted to write a story on it. And he pitched it. Southwest Airlines picked it up, and next thing you know, it was in November 2 years ago, like front page article or front page picture, which is really funny because then you had like my eyes staring at you on the back of an airplane seat as it sat in the thing. It was actually really great because my brother texted me when he was on Southwest and he said, "Hey, you think if I tell them that I know you, they'll give me a free drink?" And I said, "You can try." And he texted me back saying it didn't work. So apparently there wasn't enough, fame or power there or anything. But the moral of the story is that, I used to be a really mean person and a bully and pick on kids from, especially at the age of 13. And then I stopped. And so the real question is, how did that all, as Dean said, a life-changing moment? It was really a series of events more so than one moment. But to me, it was really waking up to my own anger, my own greed, my own ignorance, and exploring meditation and Buddhist practice that really transformed, my life and continues to transform my life. So, and I share that not about me. Most of you know me by now anyways, but really that a couple things. One, if you're a parent and you have a child that isn't doing so well, be patient, right? As my mother says, there's hope for everyone. So don't be so worried about your kids if they're not doing everything you want them to, no matter what age they are. And the other side is, don't be so worried about yourself if you're not doing everything that you think and hope and wish you were doing. There's hope for you also. So often we are our own worst critics and beat ourselves up the most. And so we can often kind of bully ourselves without even realizing it. Mentally, physically, emotionally, we really can torture ourselves. So be patient with yourself. As I always say, my favorite quote, Suzuki Roshi, or one of my favorites, said, "You're all perfect exactly how you are, and you all could use a little improvement." And it's just a reminder to not be so hard on yourselves and to be patient as you continue to go through whatever journey you're on. So, all right, with all that being said, we'll start with the meditation practice. If you are here for the first time and maybe never sat before, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. Okay, you're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. You won't figure anything out whatsoever. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working? Is it not working? Are you doing it right? Are you doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. All right. You won't think nothing. Often people think that meditation is about going blank or thinking nothing. You end up sitting there telling yourself, think nothing, think nothing, think nothing, and it's kind of a waste of time. So, and don't judge your practice. We judge things all day long, what we look like, what we wear, what we eat, constantly in these judgment modes. Posture. You want to be comfortable. If you're on the cushions, often it helps sliding to the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. Benches or chairs, also just trying to sit up straight. I'll suggest closing the eyes if comfortable, or slightly open, mouth open or closed. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means your leg hurts. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And again, starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, we'll We'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Knowing throughout the practice, you'll hear sounds. These are not distractions, not disruptions. Simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Gently guide the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Where's your mind? Lost in thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, or the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us, or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than anyone in this room, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us in this room, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get every single day. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your days. So all we're working on is closing the gap, where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not an escape, as often people think it is. It's direct perception into the present moment. And sometimes that present moment kind of sucks. And learning to be with it is the practice. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life. It's difficult. Learning to be nice to yourself, learning to be nice to others is challenging. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, which is where we spend so much of our time, and we work on our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. But it requires patience. You know, and it's interesting with that article, and I kept wanting to think about it, back to the breath, think about it, back to the breath, think about it, back to the breath. That was my 20 minutes of meditation. I'm sure all of you did nothing but focus on your breath for 20 minutes, so congratulations. But it's interesting that he brought it up, because it's basically almost 2 years to the day that thing came out. And you know what I've learned from Buddhist practice, which is a lot, is that for me, the heart of what this has been about and what I try to share is to recognize, what is that ego? What is that sense of self? What is that pride that you're holding on to that causes so much of your struggle? All of your difficulties, all of your fights, arguments, disappointments, regrets, joys, happiness, all these things are based in that ego and the pride. And this very often idea that we think we are most important. Most of us don't roam around all day long thinking that somebody else is more important than we are. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that you take it that far to think that others are more important than you. It's not about decreasing your value or what you're worth or who you are, but understanding that others are equally as important as you are. And when we're wrapped up in the ego and the pride and the sense of self, and the Buddha taught very clearly that it is actually your ego, your pride, your sense of self that causes all of your suffering. To take it one step further, the Buddha taught that there is no inherent self, that that's all an illusion. Doesn't mean you're not here, doesn't mean you're not real. Here you are. If you chop your arm off, it's going to hurt, so please don't do that, right? But your idea of who you are, your sense of perception towards yourself, I should say, is different from who you are. 10 people could describe who you are, and they all would describe you completely differently. And then you would describe who you are, and that would be completely different from those 10 as well. So all we are is a series of what's called karma, law of cause and effect. Everything we think, everything we say, and everything we do, this is what the Buddha taught, generates our karma. Who we are is really our actions. But most of us don't define that as ourselves. We think, my name is Jeff, and I am this person, and I live here, and I go here, and I do this, and I've had this experience. And we start creating a story about who we are. Those are just your experiences. Those don't define who you are. And so for me as a 13-year-old kid, my ego, my pride said, I'm better than you. I don't like who I am. And so I'm going to pick on you and tease you and beat you up and be perfectly fine with that because it's going to make me feel better. That was it. Now, whether you're 13 or 30 or 90, however old we are, we kind of bully and pick on people different ways at different stages of our lives. And so it's important to recognize how you may do that towards yourself or others. How you pick on other people, how you tease people, how you make fun of people, how you judge people, how you critique people. Again, I know nobody in here does any of that, but just in case one of you. Right? And again, all of that comes back to the sense that I am most important and that I am this bar of what everyone else should live by. And if you don't all live up to my views and my judgments and my expectations, then I'm going to tell you how wrong you are. So cutting through that ego and that pride is really the heart for me of this practice. And I say practice a lot, and that's what my teachers always said. It is a daily practice. It's something you go through every single moment of your life where you're challenged to be kind and faced with difficulties. You know, and that was the Buddha's journey. It's not like his life was simple. He had to deal with things just like we do. There's a mistake that I think often people make is they see this guy, the Buddha, in a robe and a shaved head, and that because he lived what we call simple life, that meant he didn't have difficulties, or he didn't have challenges, or he didn't have illness, or he didn't have complications. Of course he did. He was human. So often we think if we leave all of our stuff and go, retreat somewhere, that all of that's going to go away. It's not, right? That's where that expression, wherever you go, there you are. And as I always say, you could fly half around the world, sit on a mountaintop in Nepal, leave everything behind. And if you're an angry, miserable person now you're an angry, miserable person sitting on a mountaintop in Nepal, and you just spent a lot of money. So with that, I'll stop and just open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and we'll use the rest of the time to address that.
What does it mean to have a soft belly? You heard that before? Okay.
I don't
read
know.
in a book yesterday.
Those books, they ruin everything. Now you're going to spend your whole life trying to have a soft belly. I got a soft belly. It happens. One day it was a six pack and one day it was a soft belly. I don't know. I call it age. I'm not sure. I think without any sort of, do you know the person who wrote it?
Noah Levine.
Yeah, I would suggest reading something else. That's my first suggestion. You'll hear a lot in Buddhist practice and teachings that to soften everything. Right? Now, let's just think about that for a minute. This idea that we live these very tightly strung, tightly wound lives. We go through our day, everything is very tight. Rushing, pushing everyone out of our way, stuck in traffic, stuck in lines, stuck not getting our coffee properly, stuck in dialogues we don't want to be having with people we don't know or like. Everything's very tight and rigid. And so for me, this idea of soften everything, soften the mind, soften the heart, soften the belly, whatever language you want to use around it, allow everything to just relax. But we tend to be wound very tight. Does that help at all?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
It's in general relax.
In general, relax. Yes, exactly. How's that work out for you?
Kind of hard.
Kind of hard. Yeah. Hard, soft. So it's difficult. Yeah. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm reading a book that has that in it too.
Oh, that's what it's been.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I noticed that too, I kind of took it as similar to what you're saying, it's like being in a more relaxed state, like
Yeah.
not being as tense as we are, and when you have that soft belly, that means you're in a relaxed state.
Yes, relax, always helpful. And it's why most people come into meditation practice I shouldn't say most, it's why a lot of people come into meditation, is just to relax. But here's the challenge with that. If you come here just to relax, you're probably gonna need to come here a lot, right? The practice isn't just to run somewhere to relax. The practice is, how do we in our daily lives with all these people out there that don't do everything we want them to, how do we stay calm with all of that? So eventually you don't have to worry about trying to relax anymore. Your day-to-day life is just calm and relaxed as it is, right? I look at meditation Buddhist practice as preventative more than anything. Right? You don't wait till your teeth fall out, hopefully to start brushing them, you know? You don't wait till your engine blows up to change the oil. If you didn't know that, now you do, change your oil, right? But to me, this practice is preventative. It keeps us from allowing things to get so severe and bad to where we have to run to relax. Like Advil. You get a headache, pop 2 or 3 Advil, headache goes away. 6 hours later, headache's back. Take 2 more Advil, headache goes away, right? This practice is about figuring out why you're getting the headache. Why are we so not relaxed? Figure that out. And that's really pointed out from the root. Yeah.
Do you find that Buddhism is compatible with other people's existing religious beliefs?
Yes, 100%. The question was, if you didn't hear it in the back, do I find that Buddhism is compatible with other people's existing religious beliefs, especially since this is your first time here? Come up here for a second. I just want to make this very visual for you. Turn around that way. All right. Show of hands. How many of you here are Buddhist? How many hands did you see? One. All right. You can go back, unless you want to stay. So I'll start with that, right? I always say in my normal dialogue that the people who come here, we see 500-700 people a week, and the people who come here, they're Christian, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, pagan, or lack thereof, right? Often people have a very heavy religious faith, which many of the people I know do in this room, and often people come here running from a religion, which I know many of these people are also in this room are also doing. So you have both extremes, right? People that are literally at a Jewish temple this morning or a church tomorrow, and they're here. People that went to a church or a temple or a mosque or whatever 30 years ago and never want to go back. You have all of the above. To me, Buddhist practice is one of the world's oldest, largest religions, always has been, but there's no belief in a God or higher power in the Buddhist teachings. So by definition, that takes it out of religion. But if you go to Taiwan, if you go to Japan, if you go to Thailand, if you go to these places where Buddhism is what's going on, to them it is religious, right? So you wouldn't walk into a Catholic church across the street and say, yo, that's not religion, right? But the way it's typically practiced in the West is as a philosophy and a way of life. So the people who come here and Buddhism in general aren't, for the most part in a Western culture, looking at Buddhism to be their new religion. They're looking at it because they're just trying to get through their day without jumping off a cliff and add a sense of peace and happiness into their life. A good friend years ago, she was Catholic and her Catholic faith was important. And she said that Buddhism to her was like a software upgrade. It actually brought her closer to her Catholic faith because she became a kinder, gentler person. And the last thing I always say on that is the Dalai Lama, somebody asked him if this country needed more Buddhists. And he said, the world has enough Buddhists. This country just needs more people who are peaceful and happy. So absolutely is compatible. It's compatible for everything in life, not just religion. It's compatible bringing it into relationships, bringing it into traffic, bringing it into grocery store shopping, bringing it into everything. You know, it is learning to be present with things as they are. And my master always said, you can recite the Buddha's name, you can recite the name of Jesus Christ. What you recite is not so important. What you do is, you know? So does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm a Jew. So, yeah. Other thoughts, questions? Yes?
Can you expand on the Buddhist teachings around karma as it relates to like
previous lifetimes in terms of Buddhist beliefs and reincarnation and that aspect?
Sure, let me sum that up in 5 minutes. Can I comment on karma and how it relates to the Buddhist teachings on rebirth and past lives? Yes. Let me preface this by saying, do I anticipate you or anyone else in this room to be any more clear on this after I say this? No, but I'm going to share this anyways. But also let me say before I address it, for those who maybe don't know or maybe are new, that at the time of the Buddha, when he taught in India, also kind of back to your question if you weren't aware, when the Buddha was alive, the religion was Hindu, the way of life was Hindu. Everybody there, for the most part, believed in rebirth or reincarnation. If you walked up to somebody in India, this is 500 years before Christ. So if you walked up to somebody in India 2,500 years ago and said, you got one life and then you're going to heaven or hell, they would have thought you were crazy. There's no way they would have believed you. Fast forward 2,500 years to today, you go up to somebody on the streets and be like, yo, you're going to be reborn or reincarnated. And they're like, huh? What are you talking about? So it was a very different time when the Buddha was teaching from how it is today. So with that in mind, in context, all of the audiences that he was speaking to, the Sangha, his local community, all the lay people, they all believed already that they were going to be reborn, or that they were going to be, what I've seen in the Tibetan tradition, you see it translated more as reincarnation. To me, the way I was taught and learned, it was a rebirth, a continuation in very technical Buddhist terms, a continuation of consciousness, what's called the alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness, that all of your karma that you've accumulated will continue on. Now, I'll come back to that in a second. When he was teaching, the real purpose of Buddhism, what's the main reason we study and practice Buddhism? What's the first thing the Buddha taught? To what? And suffering. To suffer less. So here he is in a time where everybody believes in being reborn. And he taught that the number one thing that causes suffering is birth. Like, it's that simple. Now, again, if you're brand new to Buddhism, don't take this in such a negative way. There's a second chapter to this, but just understand, I mean, think about birth, right? When we're born, I mean, you ever see anyone come out and be like, yo, this is fun, peace, here I am. No, we're screaming, we're crying. I mean, it's a beautiful moment, right? But we come in screaming. And throughout our entire lives, we continue to scream in different ways. So we suffer our whole lives with lots of joy and happiness and wonderful moments. The Buddha didn't say all of life sucks. He just said you're going to suffer a lot and experience beautiful moments. So he taught that the only way to actually be free from suffering was to stop yourself from being reborn. Nobody here, other than one or two of you, came here because you wanted to stop yourself from being reborn. People are here because they want to suffer less. So what I'm trying to do is take what I understand to be the Buddhist teachings and translate it to today. But your question isn't about today, it's about what was going on back then. And he sat there with a bunch of people who thought they would be reborn, and the only way they could stop from suffering was to stop being reborn. And he said the only way you're going to stop being reborn is to get off of the wheel of samsara, the cycle of birth and death, and neutralize, in essence, your karma. It said that when the Buddha died, he entered into parinirvana, meaning nirvana, no rebirth, done. Nirvana means to extinguish, right? Other than a cool rock band, it actually means to extinguish. And we generate karma. Are you with me so far? Right? Let me give one more example before I go to karma. Or an example. One of the best teachings I saw on rebirth, right? And again, I know I spend 99% of my time talking to a Western audience. And most people in this room, this idea of rebirth or reincarnation ain't working for you. And it doesn't have to. It doesn't matter. Whether you believe in going to heaven or hell or being reborn, what determines all of that? Your actions. That's all the Buddha wanted you to focus on, was your actions, because that would determine whether you freed yourself from the cycle of rebirth or not. Someone years ago said, imagine you have a teacup, and in the cup is tea, and you break the cup. Cup is shattered. On your hand is tea, on your leg is tea, on the floor is tea, you wipe up a rag, still tea, right? That tea is your consciousness. It continues to change form. Very technical Buddhist teachings, they said that your consciousness leaves the body after death. Our body comes together for a period of time and then ceases to exist. That consciousness leaves the body, and then you have sperm, you have egg, comes together, consciousness enters, and boom, there you have life. So that consciousness continues on. It just changes form. Glad I clarified that for everybody. Right? Now, the important part about karma is that's what's going on. That's what's continuing is your consciousness. And as I said earlier, your karma is what you think, what you say, and what you do. Now, let's take it out of rebirth for a minute. Ever woke up and been in a really bad mood? Once in a while, right? Probably too often. And that bad mood stays for a while until something drastically changes, and then it's a good mood. Ever woke up and been in a good mood? Those happen once in a while, right? And that will stay for a period of time, usually shorter, but it still stays for a period of time, and then we're in a bad mood. So I look at this idea of generating karma, what we think, what we say, and what we do, as good moods to bad moods. Good actions to bad actions, wholesome actions to unwholesome actions, right? That's what continues. If you are in a peaceful, pleasant state when you finish here in a few moments and you walk out that door, there's a chance that that peaceful, pleasant state might stay with you for like 5 minutes on a good day, right? And then it'll be challenged. You'll be pushed up against. Someone will cut you off. Someone will say something you don't like. Someone will tell you something you don't want to hear, whatever it is. And at that moment, your karma, your actions are being challenged. What are you going to think? Are you going to allow those words to put you into a negative state of mind and a negative emotional state? Now you abide there. Same thing for positive. Someone tells you something really wonderful, right? Then you feel really good, and that's great. But that also will change. So ultimately, the Buddhist teachings about karma wasn't about making sure you're all peaceful and happy all the time. It was the practice of equanimity, which is one of the core teachings, right? Again, the way I learned about the Buddha was he neutralized his karma, meaning it wasn't good or bad, positive or negative karma. Body, speech, mind. When he sat under the Bodhi tree for 21 days, he sat perfectly still. Neutralized physical karma. Didn't say anything. Neutralized speech karma. And then you're left with his mind. I don't know what his mind was, but apparently it was pretty good. Better than mine, I'm sure. You know, so there's a lot going on there, but that's kind of a 5-minute overview of how it all works.
Thank you.
Yeah, and again, to make it, I guess crystal clear for everybody who might be confused, I don't ever, unless it's asked, focus on the approach of rebirth or reincarnation because we didn't grow up with it, we don't believe in it. That's really difficult. I focus on one day to the next, one moment to the next. Every moment you're reborn. Every day you're reborn. Again, Groundhog Day, best Buddhist movie out there. Groundhog Day, Fight Club, and Matrix. So basically leaving the cycle of rebirth is him getting out of Groundhog Day. That's it. But we're stuck in Groundhog Day because we tend to drive things through our ego, our self, and our pride. So, yeah. The fascinating thing about this whole rebirth thing is, even though we don't typically, most Western people believe in it because you didn't grow up with it and it's not important that you believe in it, imagine if you actually did. And not from a fear perspective, but imagine if you really believed that everything you did right now was going to continue. Somebody said to me once, if you want to understand your past karma, look at your present life. If you want to understand future karma, look at your present life. And if you think your present life sucks and you think that someone before you, because I've heard this question before, they're like, oh, I don't know who had my consciousness before. Well, they really screwed it up. Because look at my life now, right? These are just questions I get kind of thrown at me over the years. And the way I phrase that is like, okay, if you're going to have that perception, which isn't accurate anyways, because that person wasn't, but if you're going to have that perception anyways, then don't leave it in a messy state for the next one. You know? Clean your house before somebody else goes into it. So it might change things a little bit. Other thoughts, questions? Yeah.
So this is my first time here, and I know you touched on it briefly, but I was just curious about your past, what got you into Buddhism, and what, what tradition your teachers came from. And
yeah. I'll sum that up. We got about 5 minutes left, so I'll sum that up. First, I'll start here. I mean, as I said, I'm a Jewish kid. what got me into it's a longer story, but really by accident, I took a Chinese civilization class 24 years ago. I'm 44. When I was 20 in college, I took Chinese Civ 174 because my brother said it was an easy A. And it was. Got an A in it and everything, right? And I had to read Intro to Zen by D.T. Suzuki. And that drastically changed my life in my mind. But I was a 20-year-old college kid doing everything 20-year-old college kids do. And from the statements earlier, I was probably not a good 20-year-old kid either, right? Getting better, but still. And then I did consulting for 7, 8 years and thought if I made a lot of money, bought a lot of stuff, I'd be happy, and then I was still miserable. And then I was in line one night downtown at some club, going through my head what was going to go on all night. I'm condensing the story. And then woke up the next day and said, I need to go back to this temple I'd gone to 6 months earlier. So that was 2003, 16 years ago. Started going to the temple every day for 2-3 years. It's about a mile from here. Taiwanese, back to your lineage kind of tradition question. This is a Taiwanese-based temple, masters from mainland China. It's a Chan, which is the Japanese word for Zen. Chan and Pure Land practice. Pure Land is very heavily kind of the predominant practice in Taiwan. So I spent 2-3 years there, and then they said, you want to move to our monastery in Taiwan? So I shipped off to Taiwan, lived kind of Zen monk life for 11 months. Wasn't a monk, not a monk, probably never be a monk. And then my master said, time for you to go back and figure out how to introduce Buddhist teachings into the people that you know. And so I've been at it ever since, was there February, basically 2005, 2006, came back, and 13 years ago we opened Dharma Bums, which really ties into, so what is this place? We're not a lineage, we're not a tradition. None of us really have any right to be doing anything we're doing. You don't just start a temple, don't tell anyone that. But 13 years in, apparently it's worked. But we wanted to build a place, what we saw was a revolving door of people just like you that show up. And there's a vague interest in Buddhism or meditation. And you go to a Buddhist temple of another culture, which to me is beautiful and very dear to my heart. But I saw the Western person walk in and just walk out. They go once, the bowing, the chanting, the robes, the ritual, and it didn't speak to them. They didn't understand it, the language. So we said, well, let's build a place where we can introduce all the schools of Buddhism, most of them, to local folks who show up. So those of us who lead, we're all from different Buddhist traditions. We're not monks, I say this at the end, but we're not the master, the monk, or the nun, or the guru. We're just practitioners. And we're sharing our unenlightened approach of Buddhism to probably a bunch of other unenlightened people. My personal practice is a Zen practice, but it's not what I share. I don't necessarily think that for the average person that comes into Buddhism right away, if I had us all sit and stare at the wall for an hour straight, that would be the best thing for us all. We probably have a lot of holes in the walls. So, does that answer your question? Yeah. Or you can read that article, it's pretty good. Yeah. Eric, who wrote it, did an incredible job writing it. He was actually a kid that I bullied growing up, and he wrote the article. So it's an incredible article. I've done a lot of talks on it, and again recently, about the dynamic of coming back to karma, how our actions impact somebody. And now here we are in our 40s now, looking back on 30 plus years ago, what I was like to him, my words, my actions, what it had on, how it impacted him, and for him to kind of have the courage and the heart and be very brave to write about it. Very beautiful. And to never forget the things you've done to people, because they're real and they have lifelong impacts on them that you can't go back and change. You can only focus on, what do I do going forward? So, yeah. The bully and the Buddhist. And there's the Southwest article is much better. One of the Buddhist magazines kind of condensed it down a little bit. I don't think it's as good, but read the Southwest one, and that'll give you a longer answer to my story. Yeah. So with that, we'll close. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace.